Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs finds himself at the center of a chilling storm as fresh allegations surface weekly. With new civil lawsuits piling up, accusations of federal sex trafficking, and racketeering charges, his once celebrated empire is now under fire. What dark secrets lie beneath the fame? Who are the new voices rising against him? And how deep does this investigation go? We dive into the latest shocking twists in the case against Diddy. Welcome to Dark Truths.
All right, so are you ready to go deep on this whole Sean Diddy Combs situation?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We've been digging through legal documents and interviews, and let me tell you, it's a side of Diddy that's a far cry from the music and the parties, you know?
It is.
It's a lot more serious than just your average celebrity scandal.
Yeah, this is some serious stuff.
We're talking accusations that could have huge consequences.
Well, and it's striking, right? You know, you see the public image.
Yeah.
The success story, you know, built an empire. And then,
yeah.
you know, these accusations force us to kind of look at, you know, the dark side of power.
Exactly.
And fame.
And I think for most people, when they think Diddy, they think, you know, music icon, the guy behind Bad Boy Records, someone with a ton of money and influence.
Yeah.
But now he's facing federal charges.
Right.
And not just any charges. We're talking racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking.
Wow.
Even transportation for prostitution.
Yeah, this is not
a speeding ticket.
No.
This is the big time.
It really is. And it's particularly interesting. The racketeering charge. Suggests that prosecutors are trying to paint a picture here of a criminal enterprise, not just, you know, an isolated incident or two.
Right.
So if he's convicted on that, you know, it could mean a lot more time behind bars.
So they're coming at him with the big guns.
Yeah, they're not messing around.
And then as if that wasn't enough, you've got this wave of civil lawsuits headed his way.
Yeah, attorney Tony Busby is leading the charge here.
Yeah.
And he is not messing around either.
No.
I mean, he promised over 100 lawsuits.
Yeah, he's going for it.
And he's following through.
Yeah.
And there are two that really stand out, I think, just because of the severity of the claims.
Okay.
John Doe 1 claims he was assaulted at just 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
During what was supposed to be an audition.
Yeah.
And the lawsuit even alleges that, you know, he was given soda that could have been laced with drugs.
Oh, that's just awful.
And then you have John Doe 2, who says he was assaulted at 17 during a Making the Band audition.
Right.
And alleges that, you know, Combs pressured him into sexual acts.
Yeah.
You know, emphasizing his power to make or break his career.
Right. And that brings up this theme that seems to be running through a lot of these accusations. It's this power and coercion.
Right.
You know, this idea that Combs used his position to manipulate and exploit others.
Yeah, it's a very disturbing pattern if it's true.
It is. And how is Diddy responding to all of this? I mean, I can't imagine just staying silent with accusations this serious.
He's denied everything.
Okay.
Both the criminal charges and the civil suits. His legal team is emphasizing, you know, due process, presumption of innocence.
Yeah.
They've also called Busby an attention seeker, trying to discredit him.
Right.
You know, in the public eye.
That's a pretty common tactic, but, you know, it makes you wonder, is that enough? You know, these days.
Yeah.
In the era of #MeToo, I mean, the court of public opinion can be brutal.
Absolutely. And this case is already attracting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But, you know, beyond the public relations battle, there are some interesting legal maneuvers happening.
Okay.
For example, you know, Combs' request for a bill of particulars.
Okay. I'll admit I'm not a legal expert. So what is a bill of particulars and how does it play into his defense strategy?
Okay, so think of it like this. You've got a detective trying to solve a case, but he's only got this vague description of the suspect.
Yeah.
A bill of particulars is like the detective saying, hey, I need more specifics.
Okay.
Give me height, weight.
Yeah.
Distinguishing features.
Yeah.
In this case, Combs is essentially saying to the prosecution, hey, you got to give me more specifics about these allegations so I can properly defend myself.
So it's a way to kind of get more clarity and maybe poke some holes in the prosecution's case.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the prosecution pushed back.
Really?
Argued that he already has enough information and even suggested that he's trying to use this as a way to gain an advantage in the press.
Oh, wow.
Turning a legal procedure into a PR move.
So it's a battle on multiple fronts here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it gets even more interesting with this whole gag order issue.
Right.
He wants to prevent his accusers from speaking publicly.
That's right. His argument is that public statements from accusers could influence potential jurors,
Yeah.
jeopardize his chances of a fair trial.
Right.
But, silencing victims, even temporarily, can feel like they're being denied a voice.
Exactly.
Especially in a case like this.
Especially with accusations this serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough balance.
It is.
And it really highlights how complex this whole case is.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not just about the charges themselves, it's
Right.
about power, it's
Yeah.
about strategy, and, how the legal system grapples with accusations like these.
You're absolutely right. And there's another layer to this that we need to consider.
Okay.
And that's the place where Combs is currently being held.
Yeah.
The Metropolitan Detention Center,
Mm.
or MDC. It's a facility with a reputation for
Yeah, heard some things.
less than ideal conditions.
Right. So we're going from, Diddy's world of luxury and fame to a place that's pretty much the opposite.
Right.
I mean, does that change his legal game plan?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Does it make him more likely to fight harder
Mm-hmm.
or cut a deal just to avoid staying there?
That's the million-dollar question,
Right.
The MDC's conditions are notoriously bad.
Yeah.
I mean, understaffing, violent smuggling, you name it.
Wow.
It's had its own share of scandals.
Yeah.
And, this environment could definitely be influencing Combs' strategy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It just keeps getting more complex.
It does.
This is not just a legal battle, it's a clash of worlds. And I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Mm.
We're not just looking at accusations, we're examining these systems, the strategies, the very different realities colliding in this case.
Precisely. And we've only just scratched the surface. Stay tuned, because we're about to go deeper into the specifics of these lawsuits and what they reveal about the entertainment industry and the challenges of seeking justice.
All right, looking forward to it. We were just talking about the Metropolitan Detention Center,
Yeah, the MDC.
where Diddy's currently being held.
Right.
This place has a pretty notorious reputation.
It does.
What kind of impact could that environment have on someone like him?
Well,
I mean, someone who's used to a very different lifestyle.
it's a world away from anything
Right.
Diddy's accustomed to.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a facility that's, plagued by understaffing, violence smuggling.
A lot.
It's been the subject of investigations and lawsuits itself.
Wow.
So for someone used to luxury and control,
Yeah.
the MDC is a pretty harsh reality check.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that wouldn't influence his legal strategy in some way.
Right.
But before we get too deep into the MDC, let's circle back to these lawsuits.
Right.
We touched on two of them, but there are many more, right?
Many more.
Each one adding another layer to this whole situation.
Exactly. I mean, Tony Busby, the attorney leading the charge here,
Yeah.
is really pursuing this strategy of overwhelming pressure.
Okay.
He's filing lawsuits from multiple angles,
Okay.
each one highlighting different aspects of the alleged abuse.
So it seems like he's trying to build this, comprehensive case, this sort of mosaic of accusations that taken together, paint a pretty damning picture.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how this is playing out, in the context of the #MeToo movement.
Right.
Busby's approach seems to be, let's see how Diddy responds to, this barrage of accusations.
Yeah.
Each one potentially chipping away at, his public image
Right.
and his legal defenses.
So it's like a legal siege applying pressure from all sides.
Yeah.
But let's
Sure.
let's dig into some of the specifics.
Okay.
What are some of the other standout accusations in these lawsuits?
Well, one that's generating a lot of buzz involves a Jane Doe who accused Diddy of raping her and threatening her life back in 2004.
Wow.
What makes this case particularly interesting is the judge's ruling that she couldn't proceed anonymously.
Oh, wow. So she was forced to reveal her identity.
She was.
That seems like it could discourage other victims from coming forward.
It's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
The judge acknowledged the sensitive nature of, sexual assault allegations,
Right.
but emphasized that they don't automatically guarantee anonymity.
Okay.
The plaintiff needs to demonstrate a substantial privacy concern that outweighs the public's right to know
Right.
who's using the court system.
It's a tough call weighing those competing interests.
It is.
But I can see how, being forced to go public could make someone think twice about pursuing legal action.
Right.
Especially against someone as powerful as Diddy.
Absolutely. It raises important questions about how the legal system balances, transparency with the protection of victims.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the challenges faced by those who accuse high-profile individuals,
Yeah.
knowing that they're going to face intense scrutiny and potential backlash.
Absolutely. It takes immense courage to come forward in those circumstances.
It does.
But let's get back to Diddy's legal strategy for a moment.
Okay.
We talked about the Bill of Particulars,
Right.
but he's also pushing for a gag order to prevent accusers from speaking to the media.
That's right. That's another tactic we often see in these high-profile cases.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to control the narrative
Mm-hmm.
and limit potential damage to reputation.
Yeah.
Diddy's arguing that public statements from accusers could prejudice potential jurors
Okay.
and harm his right to a fair trial.
But like we were talking about earlier, silencing victims, especially in a case like this,
Right.
it just feels like a step too far.
Yeah, and the prosecution has argued that such a broad gag order would be unprecedented
Wow.
and could prevent victims who aren't even involved in the criminal case from speaking out. So they're essentially saying that, Diddy's trying to use this gag order not just to ensure a fair trial,
Uh-huh.
but to silence his critics and protect his image.
It's a strategy that could backfire, though, right?
It could.
I mean, make him look like he's hiding something?
Absolutely. It's a risky move, especially in a climate where, transparency and accountability are increasingly valued.
Right.
But it speaks to the high stakes involved.
Yeah.
I mean, Diddy's reputation, his career, potentially his freedom, it's all on the line.
And it's a reminder that legal battles are often fought on multiple fronts.
Right.
In the courtroom, in the media, and in the court public opinion.
Exactly. And this case is a prime example of how those different arenas intersect and influence each other.
It's like a three-dimensional chess match.
Yeah, it is.
But let's not forget about the physical space where Diddy is currently playing this game.
Right.
The MDC.
That's right.
We were just starting to talk about how that environment could be shaping his legal decisions.
Yeah, I mean, the MDC isn't just a backdrop to this story.
Yes.
Right.
It's a factor that could significantly impact the trajectory of the case. Imagine the psychological pressure of being confined to a facility that's known for these harsh conditions.
Right.
Especially for someone who's used to a life of privilege.
It's got to be a jarring experience.
It is.
So does being in the MDC make him more likely to fight tooth and nail to avoid conviction?
Yeah.
Or could it push him towards a plea deal to just get out sooner,
Right.
even if it means admitting guilt?
It's tough to say for sure.
Yeah.
But, we know that the conditions at the MDC have been described as inhumane by some.
Yeah.
There have been reports of understaffing leading to, lack of security, lack of basic services.
Right.
Violence is a concern.
Yeah.
And the facility has a history of smuggling.
It sounds like a breeding ground for despair.
It does.
And, for someone like Diddy, used to a certain level of control and comfort,
Right.
that environment must feel incredibly threatening. Absolutely. And that sense of vulnerability could definitely influence his legal strategy.
Right.
It might make him more willing to compromise to get out of that situation,
Yeah.
even if it means, accepting a plea deal that he might otherwise have rejected.
So the MDC becomes more than just a place of detention.
Right.
It becomes like a bargaining chip.
It
A
does.
factor that could sway the balance of power in these negotiations.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And it raises questions about, the ethics of leveraging someone's confinement
Right.
to influence their legal decisions.
It's a whole other ethical debate. But
It is.
but let's get specific about the MDC's problems.
Okay.
I mean, we've thrown around terms like understaffing and violence.
Right.
Can you give us a clearer picture of what's actually going on in that facility?
Sure. Well, the understaffing issue is a major concern.
Okay.
It creates this domino effect.
Yeah.
Impacting everything from security to basic services.
Yeah.
There have been reports of inmates not receiving adequate medical care, food shortages, unsanitary conditions.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
And then when you combine those conditions with the overcrowding that plagues so many prisons,
Right.
it's a recipe for violence.
Exactly. And it's not just inmates who are at risk.
Right.
Correctional officers are also in danger when they're understaffed and overworked.
Yeah.
It creates a very volatile environment for everyone.
It's a systemic problem that goes beyond any one facility.
It does.
I mean, we saw this with the recent interagency operation at the MDC,
Right.
though officials haven't confirmed if it was directly related to Diddy's presence, even if it wasn't, it highlights the broader challenges
Absolutely.
facing the federal prison system.
Right, and to get a sense of just how deep these problems run,
Yeah.
we spoke to Justin Paperney. He's a prison consultant who's worked with high-profile individuals
Okay.
navigating the correctional system.
So what were his insights?
Well,
What are some of the key issues he sees plaguing federal prisons?
he pointed to leadership failures,
Okay.
high turnover among staff, and a lack of accountability.
So it's not just a matter of throwing more money at the problem. It's about addressing these systemic issues,
Right.
improving management, fostering a culture of accountability.
Exactly. It's a complex problem that requires a multifaceted solution.
And it's a problem that's directly impacting Diddy,
This is.
whether he's ultimately found gray or not.
Right.
This experience is shaping his legal strategy, his mental state, and potentially his future.
And it's a reminder that, the legal system isn't just about laws and precedents.
Right.
It's about human beings navigating a complex and often unforgiving system.
And it's about the power dynamics that influence those systems.
Absolutely.
In this case, we're seeing those dynamics play out in the courtroom,
Right.
in the media, even within the walls of the MDC.
It's a fascinating, albeit disturbing case study in how power operates in our society.
Yeah, it is, and it's not over yet, so stay tuned as we continue our deep dive, exploring the potential outcomes of this case and what it could mean for the entertainment industry and beyond. We've spent a lot of time talking about the accusations and the legal strategy,
Yeah.
and even the conditions at the MDC where Diddy's being held. But I think it's time to kind of step back and look at the big picture here.
Right.
What are the potential outcomes of all of this, and what could this case mean for the future? Not just for Diddy, but for the entertainment industry as a whole.
Well, I think it's important to remember that we're dealing with two parallel tracks here.
Right.
You've got the criminal charges and then this massive wave of civil lawsuits.
Right.
Both carry significant consequences.
Yeah.
And, the outcome of one could easily influence the other.
Right. On the criminal side, Diddy's facing some extremely serious charges.
Yeah.
So what would a guilty verdict actually mean for him?
Well, a conviction on charges like racketeering, sex trafficking or transportation for prostitution could lead to a very lengthy prison sentence.
Yeah.
And we've already discussed the harsh realities of the MDC.
Right.
So you can imagine how a conviction would drastically change his life.
Yeah. It's hard to overstate the potential impact there. But let's say he's acquitted
Okay.
on the criminal charges.
Mm-hmm.
Does that clear his name completely?
Not necessarily. Remember, the standard of proof is different in civil cases.
Right.
So even if he's found not guilty in criminal court,
Okay.
he could still be held liable in those civil lawsuits.
Okay.
And those lawsuits could result in, substantial financial settlements.
So even if he avoids prison time, he could still face, significant consequences.
Yeah.
And then there's that court of public opinion,
Right.
which doesn't always follow the legal system's rule.
Exactly. And, regardless of the legal outcome, these allegations have already tarnished his image.
Yeah.
And it raises the question, can he rebuild his brand in his career after all of this?
That's a good question, and it's one that a lot of people are asking. We've seen other celebrities attempt comebacks after scandals, but it's a long and difficult road.
It is. It really depends on a number of factors. Will he take responsibility for his actions? Will the public believe that he's sincere?
Yeah.
Can he demonstrate genuine remorse and a commitment to change?
Right. And let's not forget about the entertainment industry itself. I
Yeah,
mean, this case seems to be part of this, larger reckoning around power and accountability, similar to what we saw with the #MeToo movement.
You're right. It's a reminder that fame and fortune don't excuse abusive behavior.
Right.
And it really highlights the need for systemic change within the industry to protect those who are most vulnerable.
So what would real change look like? I mean, what needs to happen to create a safer and more equitable environment, in the entertainment world?
Well, it starts with shifting the culture.
Okay.
Leaders in the industry need to prioritize creating a workplace where everyone feels safe and respected. That means having clear policies against harassment and discrimination, providing training on those policies,
Yeah.
and enforcing them consistently.
It also means fostering an environment where people feel comfortable, speaking up.
Right.
If they experience or witness something wrong.
Absolutely.
There needs to be a system for reporting abuse that's both accessible and confidential.
Yeah, that's key.
And when allegations are made, they need to be taken seriously
Right.
and investigated thoroughly.
Absolutely. There can't be any tolerance for sweeping things under the rug.
Right.
Or protecting powerful individuals at the expense of victims.
It's about creating this culture of accountability where everyone understands that their actions have consequences.
Right.
And that includes, those in positions of power.
Exactly. It's not enough to simply pay lip service to these issues.
Right.
There needs to be a real commitment to change.
Yeah.
And that change needs to be driven from the top down.
And this conversation goes beyond the entertainment industry.
It does.
I mean, we need to be having these conversations about power and accountability in every sphere of life.
You're absolutely right. This case is a reminder that abuse can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's up to all of us to challenge it and create a more just and equitable world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways.
Sure.
First, this case is far from over and we'll continue to follow it closely.
Mm.
But it's already sparked, this really crucial conversation about power, accountability, and the need for systemic change.
Right.
It's also a reminder that justice is a complex process.
It is.
And it doesn't always happen quickly or easily.
Right.
But most importantly, I think this case reminds us that every single one of us has a role to play in creating a world where abuse is not tolerated
Yeah.
and where everyone feels safe and respected.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.